Your comfort zone is not protecting you, it is eating you, slowly, quietly, with your complete permission and your grateful participation. And the most frightening part, the part that should stop you cold right now, is that it does not feel dangerous. That is the entire design. Comfort is supposed to feel safe. It is supposed to feel like the reward you earned, the rest you deserve, the reasonable plateau after years of effort. But here is what nobody tells you about comfort zones. They do not stay the same size. They shrink. Every single day that you choose the familiar over the unknown, every morning you talk yourself out of the difficult thing in favor of the manageable one, every opportunity you pass on, because the risk felt larger than the potential, your comfort zone gets smaller. Not dramatically, not in a way you would notice in a week, but over months, over years, the invisible walls of what feels safe move inward, and the man who used to be capable of bold decisions finds himself negotiating with himself over whether to send an email. That is not an exaggeration. That is the documented, measurable, neurologically verifiable process of what happens to a human brain that is consistently protected from challenge. And you are somewhere in that process right now. The only question is, how far in? Welcome to Prime Within. Pull up a chair, because what we are about to discuss is the most important conversation most men never have, about the thing that looks like safety and functions like a slow death. If this channel has been giving you the kind of content that actually moves something in you, please subscribe right now. Hit that button before we go any further, because what I am about to share is not comfortable, but neither is the alternative. Subscribe now, and let's get into it. In 2004, Tim Ferriss was sitting in his apartment in California, having what he described as a full psychological breakdown. His supplement company was generating millions in revenue. By every external measure, he was succeeding, and he was completely, catastrophically miserable. He had built a business that was also a prison. He was working 80-hour weeks. He was afraid to take a vacation because he believed the company would collapse without him. He was afraid to delegate because he believed no one else could do what he did. He was afraid to hire, afraid to fire, afraid to take any action that might destabilize the system he had built, even though that system was slowly consuming him alive. One night, unable to sleep and unable to continue pretending that the life he had built was working, he did something that changed everything he understood about fear, comfort, and the price of false safety. He sat down and wrote out his fears, not vaguely, specifically. What exactly was he afraid would happen if he took a month off? What was the actual worst-case scenario? And more importantly, was the worst-case scenario actually as catastrophic as the anxiety in his chest was telling him it was? Could he recover from it? What would the cost of inaction be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years if he kept living inside the comfortable prison he had built? That exercise became what Ferriss now calls fear setting, a practice he has described as the single most valuable tool he has ever used, far more impactful than any goal-setting framework or productivity system. He shared it in the 4-Hour Workweek and in a TED Talk that has been viewed tens of millions of times. And the insight at its core is the one I want to build this entire video around. The comfort zone is not neutral. It has a cost, and the cost compounds every year you stay inside it. Here is the thing about comfort zones that most people and most self-improvement content gets completely wrong. Everyone talks about comfort zones as if they are static, as if you have one and the challenge is to push past it, and once you do, you are free, as if comfort is a wall and discomfort is a door, and passing through the door is the whole story. That is not how it works. And understanding how it actually works is the difference between the man who makes one brave decision and slides back, and the man who builds a genuinely different life. Ferriss makes this point through what he calls the inoculation model. He draws it from the way the immune system builds resistance, not through a single exposure, but through regular, repeated, graduated exposure to increasingly difficult challenges. The immune system does not become strong through one encounter with a pathogen. It becomes strong through the accumulated experience of many encounters, each of which teaches it something new about what it is capable of handling. The courage to live outside your comfort zone works exactly the same way. It is not built in a single act of bravery. It is built through the daily, repeated, graduated practice of choosing discomfort in small ways, ways that feel trivial individually, but compound into something that rewires the brain's relationship to the unfamiliar. The cold shower taken every morning, not because cold showers will make you wealthy, but because the daily practice of choosing discomfort trains the brain to stop treating discomfort as a signal to retreat. The difficult conversation you have instead of avoiding, the application you submit even though rejection is likely, the business idea you act on even though the outcome is uncertain. Each one is a small inoculation. Each one tells your nervous system something slightly different from what comfort has been telling it for years. It tells it, we can handle this. We chose this. And we are still standing. Let me give you the neuroscience, because I want you to understand that what we are talking about is not motivational abstraction. It is biology. And once you understand what comfort does to your brain at a biological level, you will never look at your safe choices the same way again. The brain has a system, the amygdala, whose primary job is threat detection. It scans the environment constantly, categorizing everything as safe or threatening, familiar or unknown. When it encounters something unfamiliar, it flags it as potentially dangerous and triggers a stress response. Heart rate up, cortisol up, the body primed for fight or flight. Now, here is what most people do not know. The amygdala learns from patterns of response. If your consistent pattern, every time it flags something unfamiliar, is to retreat, to choose the familiar option, to avoid the risk, to stay in the known, the amygdala encodes a rule. Unfamiliar equals threat. Retreat is the correct response, and it gets better at triggering that response faster, more automatically, with less conscious intervention required. This is why the comfort zone shrinks. Not metaphorically, neurologically. The brain, trained by years of retreat, becomes increasingly efficient at keeping you safe from the experiences that would build you. It flags larger and larger categories of experience as threatening. The social situation, the professional risk, the romantic vulnerability, the creative attempt that might fail. All of it gets filed under danger, retreat, stay where we are safe. Ferriss talks about this through the lens of what he calls fear paralysis, the state in which the fear of taking action has become larger than any rational assessment of the consequences of action would justify. Most men who are stuck in their comfort zones are not stuck because the risk is genuinely too large. They are stuck because their amygdala has been trained through years of retreat to make every risk feel existential, to make the cost of trying feel larger than the cost of not trying. And the cost of not trying, which accumulates silently, invisibly, over years, is always, eventually, far larger than the cost of any individual attempt. right now, and I am going to ask you directly, please subscribe to Prime Within. If you are watching this and feeling the specific discomfort of recognition, the quiet knowledge that what is being described here is closer to your life than you would like to admit, that discomfort is not a reason to close the tab. It is a reason to stay. And subscribing means you come back to these conversations when you need them most. Hit that button. Hit the bell. We do this every single week. Subscribe now. Let me tell you about two men, and I am going to tell you this story through the lens of a single day, because the comfort zone does not live in the big decisions. It lives in the daily ones. The first man, call him Raymond, wakes up at 7:15. He intended to wake up at 6, but the alarm felt aggressive and the bed felt safe, so he negotiated. He has his coffee while scrolling, not reading anything he will remember, not building anything, just consuming the first thing the algorithm serves him. He drives to a job that has been asking nothing new of him for 3 years. He does what is expected, nothing more. He has been thinking about asking for a promotion for 8 months. He will do it soon, when the moment feels right, when he is sure it will go well. Raymond is not lazy. He works his scheduled hours conscientiously. He is not unintelligent. He is capable of significantly more than his current role requires. He is not unhappy in any acute way. He is just comfortable, and comfortable, maintained across years, has quietly become the ceiling of everything he is doing and everything he is building. He has been with a woman for 2 years who is pleasant, but who he knows, privately, honestly, in the conversations he has with himself at 2 in the morning when the noise is gone, is not the right person for him. He stays because leaving is uncomfortable, because starting over is uncertain, because the familiar, even when it is not right, is always more comfortable than the unknown that might be. The second man, call him Elias, wakes up at 5:45, not because he is naturally a morning person. He is not. He wakes up at 5:45 because 18 months ago he made a decision, one decision made once, and then lived every morning since, that his days were going to be built on his terms rather than on the path of least resistance. He trains. He reads 30 minutes. He works on his side project for an hour before the world has had a chance to interrupt him. 6 months ago, Elias asked for the promotion. He was told no. He thanked his manager for the clarity, went home, spent a weekend updating his skills, and applied for 3 positions at other companies. 2 of them responded. He accepted the better offer. The discomfort of the rejection lasted approximately 4 days. The financial improvement will last the rest of his career. 3 months ago, Elias ended a relationship that was not right. It was one of the hardest weeks of his recent life. He is now in something genuinely better, with a woman who has introduced friction of the right kind, who challenges him in ways that expand him rather than shrink him. The discomfort of the ending lasted approximately 3 weeks. The quality of his daily life since then is categorically different. Raymond and Elias are not different people in the way most self-improvement content would have you believe. They do not have fundamentally different characters or different starting material. They have different relationships with discomfort. One of them has trained his brain, slowly and deliberately, to treat discomfort as information rather than as a command to retreat. The other has trained his brain, slowly and without realizing it, to treat comfort as the primary goal. And those 2 different trainings are producing 2 completely different lives from the same raw material. Now I want to connect this directly to attraction and relationships, Because the comfort zone does not just keep men financially and professionally stunted. It keeps them romantically stunted in a way that most men never connect to the same root cause. Tim Ferriss talks about something he calls undefined fear, the fear that has no specific object, that is not attached to a particular outcome, that is just a generalized anxiety about something going wrong in ways that cannot be named. He argues that most people carry enormous amounts of undefined fear, and that this undefined fear is almost always more incapacitating than any specific, named, concrete fear would be, because a specific fear can be examined. It can be evaluated. It can be tested against reality. An undefined fear cannot be examined. It can only be felt, and feeling it without examining it is what keeps most people inside the comfortable prison. The man who is afraid to approach a woman he finds genuinely interesting is almost never afraid of the specific rejection. He is afraid of something he has not named, something that feels like the approach might reveal something about him, might confirm a story he carries about his own inadequacy that the comfortable distance currently protects him from knowing. The approach, in his mind, has become existential, not because it actually is, but because his amygdala, trained by years of choosing safety, has categorized the discomfort of potential rejection as a threat to his fundamental sense of self. And a threat to your fundamental sense of self feels far more dangerous than a threat to any specific outcome. Ferriss's fear-setting exercise is devastating in its simplicity when applied to this specific situation. What is the actual worst case if you approach and she is not interested? She says no, or she walks away, or she is politely unresponsive. You feel uncomfortable for approximately 48 to 72 hours. And then what? Life continues. You are unchanged in any material way. The specific thing you feared has happened, and you are still standing. But here's the thing that most men never calculate, because they are too busy avoiding the approach to think clearly about the cost of avoiding. What does another year of avoiding approaches cost you? Another 3 years? The accumulated weight of 100 interactions not initiated, 100 possibilities not tested, 100 moments where the comfortable retreat was chosen over the potentially life-altering engagement. What does that cost? That cost is not 48 hours of discomfort. That cost is years, compounded, silent, expressed not as a single dramatic loss, but as the slow accumulation of a life that is smaller than it needed to be. I want to give you Ferriss's fear-setting framework directly, because it is the most practically powerful tool in this entire video, and it is something you can do tonight in 45 minutes that will immediately change how you relate to the specific fears keeping you in your comfort zone. The exercise has 3 parts. Ferriss calls them define, prevent, and repair. Define means writing down, with the specificity of a legal document, the absolute worst-case scenario of the action you are afraid to take. Not the vague anxiety, the specific reality. If you ask for the raise and they say no, what specifically happens? If you launch the business and it fails, what specifically happens? If you approach the woman and she is not interested, what specifically happens? The exercise requires you to name the thing, because unnamed fears feel infinite. Named fears are almost always finite, and finite things can be survived. Prevent means writing down everything you could do to make the worst-case scenario less likely, not to eliminate risk. Risk cannot be eliminated, and trying to eliminate it is what produces paralysis. But to reduce it to a level where the remaining risk is proportionate to the potential reward. What preparation could you do? What information could you gather? What skill could you develop? The prevent list almost always reveals that you have far more agency over the outcome than the anxiety was suggesting. Repair means writing down how you would recover if the worst case happened anyway, not if you would recover. How? Because this is the question most people never ask. They assume that if the worst case happens, recovery is either impossible or too painful to contemplate. But almost universally, when you actually write down the specific steps of recovery, the support you would call on, the alternative paths you would pursue, the timeline within which your situation would likely stabilize, you find that the worst case is survivable, often without lasting damage, and sometimes with lessons that improve everything that comes after. The entire fear-setting exercise takes less than an hour, and what it consistently produces, for the men who actually do it rather than nod along and then return to their comfort zones, is a specific, almost eerie calm. The calm of a man who has looked directly at what he is afraid of, examined it clearly, and found that it is smaller than the anxiety was reporting. That calm is not indifference to risk. It is clarity about risk. And clarity about risk is what makes the man who acts different from the man who waits. Not courage in the dramatic sense, but the specific, grown-up, unflashy courage of a man who has done his homework and decided that the cost of trying is lower than the cost of not trying. Let me stop here for a second, because we are approaching the final section, and this is where everything comes together, and I want you here for it. Subscribe to Prime Within right now if you have not. Hit that notification bell. The men who stay subscribed are the men who come back to these frameworks on the specific Tuesday morning when they need them most. Subscribe now. Keep going. There is a version of this conversation that most self-improvement content stops at. The version that says, get uncomfortable, push past your fears, take the leap. And that is true as far as it goes. But it misses something, the most important thing, about the comfort zone and why it is genuinely dangerous rather than merely limiting. Ferriss talks about it in the context of what he calls the postponed life. The life that is perpetually one decision away from beginning. The man who says, I will build the business when I have saved enough. I will get in shape when my schedule clears up. I will pursue the relationship I actually want when I feel more ready. I will take the risk when the risk feels smaller. The postponed life is the most seductive trap available to intelligent men, because unlike pure laziness, which is immediately identifiable as a problem, the postponed life always has a reason, a logical, defensible, completely reasonable reason why now is not quite the right time. And the intelligence that generates those reasons is the same intelligence that will generate more reasons next month, and the month after, and the year after that. Ferriss discovered this in his own life, and writes about it with unusual personal honesty. He realized that the elaborate planning, the careful preparation, the waiting for readiness, all of it was sophisticated avoidance dressed as responsibility. The business he was going to start was always almost ready to start. The trip he was going to take was always almost planned. The life he was going to live was always approximately 6 months away from beginning. Until one day it was not approximately 6 months away. It was 15 years away. And 15 years of approximately 6 months away is not a postponement. It is a life not lived. The comfort zone is dangerous not because it is painful. It is dangerous because it is not painful enough. It is precisely comfortable enough to tolerate, and things that can be tolerated can be indefinitely continued. And indefinitely continued is the mechanism by which a man arrives at 60 having lived, as Thoreau wrote, a life of quiet desperation, not because anything terrible happened, but because nothing genuinely alive ever did. The last thing I want to give you before the close of this video is something practical, something specific, something you can do in the next 24 hours that has nothing to do with dramatic life changes and everything to do with retraining the neurological pattern we talked about at the beginning. One uncomfortable thing. Today, not the most uncomfortable thing available to you. The one that terrifies you. The one that requires months of preparation. The one you have been building toward. Just one uncomfortable thing that you have been avoiding. An email you need to send but have been postponing. A conversation you need to have but have been managing around. A step toward the thing you said you were going to do but have been waiting to feel ready for. One thing. Today. Not because one thing changes your life, but because one thing done today builds a slightly different brain from the one that chose comfort yesterday. And that slightly different brain is the foundation that makes tomorrow's uncomfortable thing marginally more accessible. And the one after that. And the one after that. Until 6 months from now, you look back at the man who was negotiating with his alarm at 7:15, and you understand, from the inside, with the specific clarity that only experience provides, what Tim Ferriss understood sitting in his apartment in 2004. The comfort zone was never protecting you. It was just keeping you from finding out what you were actually capable of. And what you are actually capable of, the real number, the actual ceiling of what this specific, individual, unrepeatable human life can produce when it is lived with courage rather than comfort, is something you cannot know from inside the comfortable prison. You can only find out from the other side of the decision you have been postponing. Make it today. And before I let you go, thank you for spending this time here. If this video moved something in you, if it named something you have been living with but unable to articulate, please do one thing. Subscribe to Prime Within. Share this with one man who is inside a comfortable prison right now and does not yet know that the door was never locked. We will be here next week with something just as important. Subscribe now. Master yourself first. Build your legacy.